right. This is the way to get it forward. If the junior flyers will come forward and lead us in the pledge, if we'll all stand and face the flag. Junior flyers, come forward. We have a Boy Scout amongst them, so he can sort of take the lead.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If the junior flyers will come forward and introduce themselves and tell us what you compete in. Becoming a famous athlete, you have to become comfortable with the microphone. Come forward, gentlemen.
I'm Nick Ostrike. This is my brother and sister. I've been racing for several years.
Several years.
I've been racing for 6 years and riding for like 9. So.
Great.
My name's Ryan Garvey, and I've been racing for 1 year.
Great, Ryan.
My name is Annalise Ostrike, and I've been racing for 3 years.
My name's Max Ostrike, and I've been racing for 4 years.
I'm Jerry Latham, and I've been racing for 3 years.
My name is Sophia Broadwell, and I've been racing since I was 9.
So what titles do you have, Sophia?
I have a few state champion titles, and I have a 3rd place at nationals in 2011, I think, and then a 5th place at nationals in 2012.
Well, let's have a hand for the junior flyers. Thank you. Welcome to the September 10th meeting of the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilmember Wynn, second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Yes, Councilmember Price. Certainly. Do you want to pull that off the agenda? Either way. Well, let's pull it off the agenda and then we can discuss it later. So do we have a motion? We're taking item 3 off the agenda, the policy on high school mascots painted on public roads. We're voting on the meeting minutes and the accepting a parcel right-of-way acquisition. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. It's unanimous. We'll call the transportation matter as part of the Transportation Department. Councilmember Diamond. First, we have a reading about the Constitution Week. We have the, who do we have here? Mary, the Martha Stewart Bullock chapter. I recognize all of the medals here. Ladies, if you'd come forward as I read the Constitution Week proclamation. Whereas September 17th, 2014 marks the 227th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary and the patriotic celebration which will commemorate this occasion. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, am proud to proclaim the week of September 17th, September 23rd, 2014 as Constitution Week in the City of Roswell, and ask all of our citizens to affirm the ideals of the Constitution by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. Welcome to the City Hall, and do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would just like to remind everyone here today to please remember on September 17th to give pause to the 227th anniversary of the signing of our Constitution, and to know that in Roswell, our Martha Stewart Bullock DAR chapter and our Martha Stewart Bullock CAR Society will be very active in the community, going into the schools, giving programs on the Constitution, delivering proclamations, ringing bells, signing Constitution Week scrolls, visiting nursing homes, senior citizen centers, and other activities to remind our citizens that it's up to each and every one of us to safeguard this Constitution for ourselves and for generations to come. And I want to thank Roswell. You have always done such a wonderful job supporting our efforts in all of our commemorative events, and we thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of the City of Roswell, I want to thank the Martha Stewart Bullock chapter because to bringing this to our citizens' attention and promoting the Constitution and all that it means to us. Let's have a hand for the Martha Stewart Bullock chapter. Thank you, ladies. And we have another great group here, the American Legion. And I have a proclamation to read on behalf of the American Legion. I think I have Roger Sonny Wise here representing the American Legion. And we're recognizing American Legion Day. Whereas the American Legion was chartered by Congress in 1919 on September 16th as a wartime veterans organization based on the 4 pillars of Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation, National Security, Americanism, and Children and Youth. And whereas over the years, the American Legion has become a community-based service organization, more than 2.5 million members, men and women, and over 14,000 American Legion posts worldwide. The American Legion supports a variety of programs that support the 4 pillars and benefits our nation's veterans, its service members, their families, the youth of America, and American citizens. And whereas the members of the American Legion are dedicated to upholding the ideals of freedom and democracy while working to make a difference in the lives of their fellow Americans, and whereas the 2014 observance of American Legion Day provides an opportunity to recognize our Legionnaires for their many contributions to our Roswell community. Now, therefore, I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, do hereby proclaim September 16th, 2014 as American Legion Day, and ask all of our citizens to recognize and support the efforts of the American Legion of the Roswell community and worldwide. And with that, I would like to recognize a Legionnaire, Roger Wise, for further good words.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. City Council, City of Roswell, as an ambassador for the American Legion, we're privileged to receive this proclamation. We thank you very much for recognizing what we do in our communities. And I live in Roswell. I love Roswell. And every day when we do, or every year when we do our Memorial Day service, when we do our children's parades, and there's so many things that you do that makes our community a very, very special place. My children all were raised here. They've gone here and far, but they've all come back to Roswell. And so I was talking with someone today, the same thing. They all come back to Roswell. So thank you for making the city the quality of life we have. And on behalf of the Legionnaires nationwide, state of Georgia and North Atlanta, we say thank you for recognizing our efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Legionnaire. Let's have a hand for the American Legion. Thank you, sir. I would like to invite everyone to come to Roswell's 9/11 ceremony. It will be held tomorrow morning, beginning at 8:30 at the Faces of War Memorial. I'm afraid that I and the council are going on a city-sponsored trip, a Roswell Inc.-sponsored trip to Asheville, and will not be there, but we'll have many Roswell employees at the Faces of War Memorial, and it's a moving ceremony. How many years have we been doing this every year since 9/11, as I recall? So it's 13 years. It's a great tradition, and I encourage you all to come. The American Legion and the Daughters of the American Revolution and all of our citizens, because this is all tied together. So welcome to that. Next, I'd like to recognize the Junior Flowers. They have a presentation to make.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Eric Broadwell. I am the president of Junior Flyers, and we just wanted to come tonight to say thank you. We put on the event every year, the Georgia 400 Century Ride, where we get to shut down Georgia 400 and take over the lanes with bicycles. And we can't do that without the Roswell Police, and we have a donation for their foundation, the Roswell Fire and Police Foundation. It's a check for $1,000 to say thank you for all the service that they do, and I'm glad to present this check. But before I do, let me give you just a few stats. We had a video, but unfortunately we couldn't get the internet working, so I'll just give you a few of the highlights. We had over 1,368 documented riders, over 110 volunteers, and the riders self-reported that they spent $39,300 here in Roswell in preparation for the ride, either through buying new merchandise, a new bike, food, whatever. But I can tell you that's probably underreported, because several of the registrations that happen at Roswell Bicycles, I happen to get those receipts where they pay at Roswell Bicycles and brings them into the shop, and they'll say, I'm going to spend 20 bucks, and right there on the receipts an additional $60 on top of the registration that they spent in the store. So I know it brings a lot of economic impact here to the city, and several people do stay at the 400 Hotel or at the Embassy Suites and ride across to start the ride. But I'd like to present this to the chief. Check for $1,000.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's have a hand for the Junior
Appreciate it.
Flyers. Thank you.
And we're also making a donation to our other civic organization here around cycling. Bike Roswell will be they're having their meeting tonight on the Grand Fondo. Our next, probably the biggest ride is going to happen in Georgia. And we're headed over there now to present their check to them. They couldn't make it here because of their planning meeting for the ride. So thank you.
Well, Eric and Junior Flyers, thank you for bringing cycling to Roswell. We're proud of being the first bicycle-friendly city in the state. It means something to us to attract good citizens and not just visitors, but people who live here. I've talked to several people when I'm occasionally riding my bicycle around Roswell, and ask them, where do you live? And when they say they live in Roswell, ask them why they come. And the new resident said, because Roswell is a bicycle-friendly community. So thank you for attracting good citizens to the city of Roswell. And one more hand for the Junior Flyers and what they do for our community. Thank you. We have a new fire chief, if he'll come forward. I'm going to give him the floor. Chief Burnett, our new fire chief, we're happy to have you on board. He's not new to the city of Roswell. How many years has it been, Chief?
28.
28. So he's a relative newcomer to the Roswell Fire Department, but not unknown. But he's taken over the leadership, and we're proud of his accomplishments and proud of his leadership. He has the full support of the council. He has the confidence of the fire department. And I know he'll continue to do a good job. Any words you want to add to that?
I just want to thank the mayor and council and Kay for giving me this opportunity. I'll work hard for you, I promise you that, and I'm here just to try to make a difference every day and support you and the citizens of Roswell.
Does the council have anything to add?
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard. That's
Thank
a
you.
great comment. Thank you, sir. Let's have a hand for the chief. At this time, it's my pleasure to call upon liaison to Community Development Department for a short agenda. Councilmember Becky Wynn. You got 5 minutes to cover.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 items. I'm hoping we can go fast on them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first one is RZ 201400970, concurrent variance 201400974, 110 Woodstock Road, Lehigh Homes. And Mr. Brad Townsend, our planning director, will be presenting. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Councilmember Wynn. This is a proposed rezoning with concurrent variances located at 110 Woodstock. It's approximately 2.4 acres. The existing property is zoned RS12. The proposal is for RTH for the construction of 21 townhome developments. This is the aerial of the surrounding property. As you can see, on the majority of it, it has existing cemetery to the east and to the south. To the west is the parking lot, cell tower, and water tank adjacent to Manhinnett. To the north is townhouse development. This is a aerial of the location of the property subject to the development. This is a proposed site plan showing the 21 townhome developments, one access to 110 to Woodstock Road. The applicant is requesting reducing the required buffers as part of the PRD along the eastern and the western of the property line. To the north of the property is where the detention and connection trails and sidewalks are located on the north. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the rezoning with the approved buffer, Section B, which is next to the water tanks, and recommended denial of the variances to the buffers A, B, C, D, and E, which are along the eastern property line next to the cemetery. Staff recommended approval of the rezoning without the buffer variances. If you have any questions.
What was the, did the staff or the Planning Commission have any thoughts on the buffers?
The staff dealing with the buffers recommended the approved buffers required as part of the PUD or as part of the UDC be applied to the property. We see no real concern since the buffers that are being requested reduces are not next to any existing homes. It's either next to the park or the cemetery or the water tank or the cell tower, so it's not adjacent to homes in which the buffers are being requested reduced. So we do not see any real hardship for them, but because the UDC did call for specific buffers, staff could not recommend approval of reducing the buffers.
So it was just technically you're following them, although you did
Correct.
recognize that it was not next to any residential or
Correct.
commercial use. It's all right. And the Planning Commission, did they have any thoughts on that?
They did not recommend reducing the buffers adjacent to the cemetery. They felt the reduction next to the water tank and the cell towers was applicable because by moving next to the cemetery along the eastern property line, there's a couple of specimen trees in which the entranceway is trying to stay out of the critical root zone. That in essence is pushing the homes further closer, or the proposed townhomes closer to the water tank.
I understand.
Thank you.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Price.
Can you clarify the buffer requests? Can you clarify the buffer requests on each side and how they're enumerated or lettered?
This is buffer B at this location, which is along the water tank and the cell towers in this location. It's being requested to go from a 40-foot requirement down to 8 feet. These buffers along the cemetery, letter C, is a 40-foot requirement going down to 13. And then this varies in this location here. It's a 40-foot requirement going from 13 in this location to 32 in this location. And we have a buffer A, a 40-foot requirement I believe that one's going down to 5 feet. And then the buffer D in this location, a 40-foot going down to 30 feet.
Does that answer your question?
Okay, so there's no buffer request at the far backside,
Correct.
but there are 4 separate ones on the right side of the eastern
Correct.
border. Nothing on the road, obviously, and then
One on the
one on the
western.
on the cell or the water tower side.
Correct.
Okay.
Rich, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Townsend, in those buffer areas, under the UDC, we require a certain amount of trees to be included. Is there an equivalent number of trees included in these buffers, even though the distances are small?
The same amount of trees, I think there's going to be a difficulty in putting, you know, when we put 40-foot of buffer, we have trees so often, that would still be a requirement. I think the scenario is that may be too many in, you know, if you have 40 feet of area to put trees in and now they only have 8 feet of area, it may be over landscaping it to a certain degree. So the landscape arborist would look at the requirement and deal with that buffer appropriately if approved.
So we really don't know how many trees they would have been required to put in in the buffer versus what they are requesting to put in here.
Correct.
Is it possible to figure that out in the next 15 minutes?
I'm sure we can take a stab at it.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. At this time, we'll hear from the applicant. I think you need to focus on the hardship that you feel you're under because of these variances.
Brendan Walsh, 120 Thompson Place, Roswell, Georgia. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys tonight. I'm here to ask for a rezoning, as Brad mentioned, from RS12 to RTH at 110 Woodstock Street, and a concurrent variance with the buffers on each side.
Sit up there, Brad. Sorry.
Once again, I'm Brendan Walsh. I'm the president of Lehigh Homes and Development, which is a family business here in Roswell. We're located here in historic Roswell, and I'm also a resident of historic Roswell. My company focuses on infill development in areas that are unique, that provide us access to walkable areas and great architecture. A little history about myself here in Roswell. We did Providence and Historic Roswell, which is right here off of Canton Street. We started that project in 2009. It was sitting vacant since 2005. When we started that project, streets and pavement, curb and gutter, all that stuff was already in, so we were a little limited on the site and exactly what we could do. But we took those 41 units that were approved there and decreased those to 35 units to help with green space and park inside the community itself. There's a picture of the finished product that we have there in Providence. We also did Providence Historic Roswell Phase 2, which is under construction right now. There's foundations in the ground. These were 4 vacant parcels, so we were afforded a little more leeway with what we wanted to do in designing the plan from the ground up. In doing so, we incorporated single-family residences along with townhome product to blend in with the existing heritage that's on the street back there. Same kind of concept. We wanted to decrease density back there so we could provide more parks and green space. Now I'll get into a little more about the specifics of 110 Woodstock and how we arrived at this moment here. We purchased this property a few years ago, and when we purchased it, I'll kind of set the setting here for you. When you go down Woodstock Street, it's all offices and commercial spaces, and you come across this property, and there's a water tower and a cell tower to the west of it, a cemetery to the east, and existing townhome developments to the north of it. It's completely overgrown at this point and has been for some time. And when we purchased this, I had some people telling me we were a little crazy for doing it. They didn't see the value that was there. When I looked looked at it, I saw it as a big positive. It was a link between the great development that's happened on Canton Street and the new development that's starting to happen on Alpharetta Highway with Thumbs Up, Lucky's, Pure, the elementary school now, the existing development of Liberty. It's a great area for walkability. It connects to parks. The soccer fields are right beside us there. Connects to retail, to offices, and to public transportation. There's a MARTA bus stop within a couple hundred yards. When I first purchased the property, I was kind of gung-ho on doing a mixed-use building there, some sort of combination of apartments, condos, retail, restaurant, office, townhomes. So when I had my land planner start to put together conceptual plans, it's really what I wanted to accomplish here. After they were able to put together some plans, I couldn't get comfortable with what we were doing from a site layout and a site design. So I decided to go out, meet with key players in the area. In doing so, I met with residents in the area, HOA presidents in the area, the Roswell Historic Society, which is a big part of the historic cemetery, which is next door, business owners, Parks and Rec, and the Roswell Art Commission. And some of the feedback that I got was no apartments in this area. They wanted to protect the existing specimen trees which were there, manage the stormwater properly, and manage the sanitary sewer properly. Provide privacy and a buffer between the existing residents to the north and the townhome development, which has been there for almost 30 years, and respect the sensitivity of the neighboring cemetery, which is to the east. As far as retail feedback we got, business owners weren't as interested in this area, and we also got some feedback about what kind of additional traffic we'd be putting on a Woodstock Street with the one entrance there. With that being said, we went through several iterations of plans. This was a very thought-out process for what we wanted to do. We stumbled across a few different plans. We had some things that were meeting all the codes that we wanted to meet with no variances and on the buffers that we're looking at, but I really wasn't happy with the design of the plan. It didn't give the privacy to the neighbors to the north who have been there a long time, and it didn't give that great design aspect is what I really desire when I put together a project. So I went back and we started to focus on a different plan, and we used a lot of new urbanism concepts in this. As you can see on the site plan, there's a large open space and a park to the north of the site. There's a community gathering area and that same thing. From the success that we had in Providence and Roswell, something we figured out is residents are ready to downsize in this market, but they still want to have their own little public or their own little private green spaces. So we've incorporated in that plan where there's a spot to set up your grill or a spot to let the dog out, which is important from someone who's coming from a half-acre lot down to a townhome community. We also were very active with the Roswell Arts Commission in figuring out a way not only to put some sort of public art designed into our project, but also look at the surrounding area. Is there any kind of opportunity for public art there? And we saw that actually with with the water tower right next door, and that's a different subject, but I think there's some potential with that as well. We followed the guidelines of the 2030 comprehensive plan in doing townhomes in this area. And the thing that was probably most important to me was the strong curb appeal. You'll notice on this plan everything is a rear entry garage, which is what I always strive for in a townhome development. And the way that we orientated these buildings is from all of the high traffic areas where people are going to be the most, Woodstock Street, the parks, if people are walking through the cemetery, that's where you're going to see the front of these buildings and you're going to see the great design that we're able to put out there. We also focus on the connectivity off the site. How can we create biking trails, walking trails? I know transportation is requiring us to do a biking lane actually on Woodstock Street. How can we tie all these things into the heartbeat of the city, which is Canton Street? And at the same time, like I mentioned, is creating that buffer and park area between the residents and Townsend Place. That's how we arrived at the site plan that we're looking at here today. As you can see, if you're standing on Woodstock Street and you're looking at buildings 1 through 4 there, those are all the front entries of the building. It's got a shared alleyway with buildings 5 through 8 there, so the garages will be hidden. 5 through 8 then is highly visible from a green space or a park area we have designed in the community. Same thing with units 9 through 13. As well as units 14 through 17, that's what you're going to see from Woodstock Street as well, is the fronts of the buildings and the great elevations we're able to design there. And then units 18 through 21 are going to be faced onto our park area, walking area, and detention system. As far as What else I really love about this site is kind of what Brad mentioned. There's some large specimen trees. We're at the very front of the property to the southeast corner there. We've got the road orientated as far west as we can go to save those specimen trees that you see there. You'll see the walking paths and the connectivity. There's a great historic trail which goes right through the cemetery currently, which we'll be tying into, as well as we're looking to add another addition on the west side that will tie into the Parks and Rec soccer field parking lot to give easy access to that park system. In putting together this plan, after we were comfortable and I was happy with the design and the look of this, I wanted to go back to the public and get an idea and get their feedback and comments on how they felt about this plan now that we're narrowed in on a better design compared to our previous plans. And so some of the issues that were brought up with this from a site concern was our sewer line and the verification of Fulton County sewer system in the area and our ability to tie into it. We also heard more feedback about our stormwater management system. So we were able to come to an agreement with the Townsend Place residents of a piping system and easement that runs through their I guess it would be their eastern side of their development, which eventually would be hard piped and tie in all the way to the back of Prospect Street. I think that's a real key not only for us, but for Townsend Place and the area in general. They had a little bit of an issue with some water runoff coming from the soccer fields in the parking lot there, and if we're able to complete this project, I think it helps alleviate their problem. As well as the redesign of our stormwater facilities with that hard piping, which we'll be able to keep a closed system now. That closed system is going to help us in the interior of our project decrease the size of our stormwater detention facility, and in turn doing so, we're going to stay out of a lot of the critical root zones and specimen trees in that area. We heard more feedback about the traffic in the area, so I believe at the Planning Commission we submitted another report. We went above and beyond and did a traffic report for this area showing that there would be no detriment to the area. The other thing which has been a sensitive subject is the cemetery. We are very sensitive ourselves to the cemetery. Part of what we did there is we did a report where we went out with some initial probing in the area to see if there was any area concerns. That would be, probing is kind of your first step in the project. You want to make sure if you're looking for graves, unmarked graves in that area, it's going to be the less disturbed way to do it. Next, after we found some areas that brought us some concerns, we used a radar technology to go under the ground from that area. What we found there, it was buried trash, rubble, things like that, bottles. There was areas where we had done our own soil testing in that area, and that's all we found with the radar system. As far as the variances and what were needed, I know there's been a lot of discussion on the variances in this area, and we're in a very unique situation here. If you're in a townhome project and you're abutting a civic space, which is what the water tower, cell tower, the cemetery is considered, there's two options you can do. You can do a 40-foot buffer with the required landscaping that Brad mentioned, or you can do a 20-foot buffer with an 8-foot privacy fence. What we're asking for is a reduction in the buffer alongside the water tower and the cemetery. We would like to reduce from the 40-foot to avoid the 8-foot fence around the property for two reasons. The 8-foot fence we feel that would go on the property is going to provide a very hard background to the cemetery, and this is going to be very important for the cemetery of the look. If you're standing inside the cemetery, what our project's going to look like in the background. We feel it's better to soften up with landscaping rather than do the 8-foot fence, which will be required under the 20-foot buffer. The other part of the buffer is it helps.
And I apologize for interrupting, but it'll help me understand. Under the current UDC, you can, is it my understanding, you can either have a 40-foot buffer with no fence or a 20-foot buffer with an 8-foot privacy fence?
Correct.
Are you going to maintain the 20-foot buffer area with that? Are you simply saying I want to go from 40 feet to less than 40 but still maintain 20? Or are we dropping below 20 in places?
We would like to drop to below 20 to avoid the fence, the 8-foot privacy fence. We're not opposed to doing a different style.
Now you still have at least 20 though. Are you dropping below 20 in places?
We're dropping below 20 in places.
So you're asking to reduce the buffer below 20 and to eliminate the fence. It's a combination, not just eliminate one. I'm getting the nod yes over here. I understand now. I want to make sure I understand the facts. So we're asking for a variance to the 20-foot buffer and to eliminate the privacy fence. I got you.
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize for interrupting.
It's okay. And I'll show you here on the site map too, what this helps us do with the variance is it helps take our project more east-west than north-south. And like I said, there's residents to the north who have been there for quite some time, and helps us create that usable green space and that buffer between those current residents there. Oh, sorry. So here's the areas called out where we're looking to do the buffer reduction. To the left is the area B that Brad mentioned that abuts the water tower. And then there's really 4 separate ones on the right there, all kind of incorporated into the same thing. The reason that they're called out separately is with the angles of the site and how the existing property lines work. They just change with the amount of footage in between at certain areas just because everything's not parallel.
But just so you can break this down, if you could tell me how much buffer you're giving in each one of those areas. It looks like in D, it looks like 30 feet. A buffer, or is that, am I wrong or right?
It doesn't call it the buffers. My ABC. Yes, so with the way that you're asking right now, for example, buffer area D is asking for a reduction from 40 feet to 30 feet. And the reason we're asking for a reduction there is we don't want an 8-foot privacy fence that runs to the corner of the property there and runs back. So we could get away with doing the 20-foot buffer with an 8-foot privacy fence. In my opinion, it's just bad design from that standpoint, and it's not going to provide them.
All right. A
is a reduction. It would be a reduction from a 20-foot buffer to a 5-foot buffer without a fence.
Okay, and then looks like E varies from like approximately 12 to 30 feet.
Correct. Kind of 30 feet in the median of the alleyway there, and then decreases kind of up and down. C would be 13 feet at the northern corner there. On the notes on this plan, it calls out the planting schedule that we would do with these reduced buffers.
Thank you. Question from Councilmember Price.
Can you identify the areas where you probed from that
Cemetery report.
picture there?
Report. Yeah. Sorry. Basically a 30-foot line that runs parallel to our property line here from the northern property boundary all the way down to Woodstock Street.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry again. So how far in did you look? Or
30 feet.
30 feet in from the property line?
From our property line, correct.
All the way down to the road?
Correct.
Oh, okay. And how much of that is where proposed building would be?
Here's the actual copy from the cemetery report itself. As far as being into that 30-foot zone, you're really going to have, if you kind of see where the angle of that is there and how it corresponds to this plan here, the corner of unit 17 and the corner of unit 18 would be really the only ones in that area.
Okay, so they were 17 and 18, where the 17 and 18 would potentially be our areas where you probed?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Please proceed. Sorry for the interruption.
I think that's about it.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
First, I know, and you've said, and I've heard discussions you've had with folks all around, and you've made a number of changes based on that input, so thank you for that work, because I think it's important and appreciated. And I know in the Planning Commission there was discussion about the eastern buffer. I think that's the ones you just looked at.
Yep.
And we're having a new interest in the Woodstock Cemetery. The Historical Society has come forward and want to do some things with that. And I guess the reasoning for the civic buffer was not so much for the homes, because clearly there are residents, but they're more permanent than some others, so they're probably not too worried about it. But though, as we work on the cemetery, how close buildings are. And I don't know, I never did put on this drawing, but there's a set right along that property line where there are some existing gravestones, and I don't know exactly where they are, but it's going to be awfully close, I think, to 18. Have you given any thought about the possibility? Because you and I discussed this long before you even put the application in. You said, and I agree, that the 4 units probably to sell last are the 2 next to the water tower, or the 2 next to the cemetery.
Right.
And I'm just, have you given any thought? I know you never want to reduce numbers, but to the last 2 that really make that buffer closer, and it's closer to the cemetery and existing graves, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, follow up, actually, I have one more slide here. I understand I've met with Johanna Harlan from the Roswell Historical Society. I've actually walked the site with her and her associate. I know there's a meeting on the 23rd, which I'll be attending as well. There's an issue with the cemetery as it is now, where they have an issue with maintenance and maintaining and overgrowth and all those things. And I feel like this is a great opportunity to coincide with their initiative, with what we're doing with our project. Is, like I spoke about, this is going to be the backgrounds of the historic cemetery there. And so we want to design and make sure the landscaping and the buffer requirements that we have in between are providing the best backdrop, not only for our project, but for the cemetery itself. And part of what we've looked at is if you do the 20-foot buffer, which we could get to if needed, you're going to end up with that 8-foot fence, and you're going to have an area in between the cemetery and the outside of our project, which is going to be, we think from a long-term standpoint, tough to maintain. It's going to create a hard background from the cemetery, followed by another hard background, which will be our buildings. So that's why we're asking more in the reduction of no fence as well, to tie in with these buffer requirements. I have mutual, I have a mutual goal here as the cemetery as well. We respect it. We want to make sure what we're doing, provides good design and good look for not only our benefit, but for the cemetery's benefit as well.
Right, and I agree, and certainly I think we can give the variance for the no fence regardless of whatever the distance is.
Right.
So I think that's not the biggest concern. To me, what's more the closeness of those units to, what ultimately, hopefully, is going to be a revitalized cemetery. I'm not sure that's the right word to
right.
use for a
right.
cemetery.
Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brendan, you had discussed a private agreement with the
yes.
homeowners association. I think Ms. Henry also.
Yes.
And I just want to let council know that this is not a condition of zoning. It's actually a private agreement between you and those 2 entities. And my assumption, I'm hoping I'm not jumping the gun, but go ahead and read, just put that into the minutes on the record. Am I correct?
Correct.
That's how you want
yes.
to handle that?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that's, that's, we can do that and just, I think, give it to Mr. Townsend. We can have it on the record. And I do want to thank you for doing that. I think one thing that we do have to do is, so what, I'm going to follow up on Councilman Eigerhardt's suggestion. So you feel that increasing that 5-foot buffer to maybe increase that is not in the best interest of this development, or not for the cemetery? So how does Joanna feel about having that close to those 2 graves? I think it's 2 or 3 graves right there.
I spoke to Johanna, and she's not allowed to speak publicly with her position, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say how she feels or not. But
give me your opinion about how the meeting went. How's about that?
I think the meeting went very well. To be honest with you, when we originally started the project and we were vetting what we wanted to do here, we were even closer, and that's where the Historical Society had some concerns. We then have moved away further from what we originally designed. So walking the site with her and seeing how the 2 parcels are going to play off of each other, I think she was very happy with what we have designed now.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple of questions. The first is, again, the council is looking at cemeteries as a place for people to reflect and a sort of a passive park. And we know that we have trails through this cemetery. Is there any possibility of, without walking over graves, to get from your rear loop trail around your property over to the cemetery trail system? I know because it's a great way to get over to Thumbs Up and to Pure.
I agree with you. And some of our original iterations, we had that connection in, and doing a little bit of title work in that area. The cemetery is actually 2 different parcels, and the northern parcel is owned by a private entity. The southern parcel is not. So we were our power was a little restricted.
So here's a question for staff. Is that private entity who owns this property maintaining this property? You know, it's one thing to own it and have title to it, but the city is now being asked to accept responsibility for maintaining, as I understand it, this entire cemetery. So it doesn't affect you, but it's a question I have. If we have a property owner who owns this and hasn't abandoned this property, if we're maintaining his property, we need to take a hard look at that. But what I would like to see is an easement to get from, if in the future we got an agreement with the property owner, or the property owner abandoned this as the previous whoever owned this property did, I'd like to see the potential for a connection between that rear trail and the cemetery system. So maybe if you just gave an easement, even if we don't do it now, there'd be potential in the future for connection if things worked out. The second point I would like to see is, this is a civic space. There will be people on this space, and although I can see the reason not for an 8-foot fence, which creates a visual barrier and a whole different world, I still would see the need for a sort of a demarcation between the properties. And whether that was a split rail fence or a wrought iron fence or some other fence that was suitable for a cemetery of this vintage, I would like y'all to consider that, because I see not just a landscaping demarcation, but for a difference between the public and private property, for people to know where that break is. And I can't speak for the rest of the council, but recognizing that the purpose of buffers is usually to buffer inconsistent uses, I don't think the folks in the cemetery are going to mind having neighbors. I know that in Philadelphia, where they had the Constitution passed, they have urban cemeteries very close to all sorts of other properties, so I have no, I see no benefit of creating a buffer to buffer these residents departed on this property, and I would support a variance on this property. Other comments from council before we go for public comment? Yes, Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just feed off of Mayor. Would you be amenable to maybe doing a stub out for the trail, so if and when it does happen, we're right there? So would you be amenable to doing something like that?
Yeah, 2 things. Absolutely. On our first original plan, that's what we were showing. We took it off because of, like I said, the title work that we did, so we were a little hesitant to show it tying into something that we didn't have power of. The second part about the fencing, we're open to doing, whether it be a split rail fence or more of a wrought iron type fence along that. We don't want our residents Neanderthaling, out onto the gravestones from that standpoint. We just want that softer visual break between the 2 properties.
So you would not be hesitant to say, if you would consider alternative fencing on that area, you would be okay with that?
Yes.
Not so much a condition of zoning, but ask you if you could consider that?
Yes.
And again, the stub out, you would have no problems with that being part of the conditions?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we open up for public comment? Councilmember DePolito.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, I'm trying to understand your 5-foot buffer. It's a little hard to see on this plan. Do you happen to have your SP1 handy that you could put up?
Yeah, which one's this? I've got it here.
Because it looks like there's more than 5 feet, so I'm trying to understand why that's there we go. Because you have, the heavy lines are 5 feet apart, but there appears to be quite a distance from even the sidewalk. It looks like another 5 feet from the sidewalk to the buffer line. I guess I'm thinking visually it appears like there's a lot more between the property line and the house than 5 feet.
You're correct. As part of the buffer requirements, your normal setbacks get pushed on the outside of the buffer requirement as well. So if we have a buffer requirement there, we'd have a 5-foot setback that associates with that buffer requirement. With it being a buffer and not a setback itself, that's why we need the reduction to actually get the sidewalk through that area as well. And then the small dash lines are the private courtyard areas that you see there. Those are 10 feet itself. So I think if you went from the front of building 17 to the property line in this area here, you're more at a 20-foot actual distance. You're at a 20-foot actual distance from this property line of the cemetery to the actual building.
Okay, and those private courtyard areas, what do you envision those being?
Some sort of open fencing type thing where the person feels like they own the space in that area, that it gives them a little bit of privacy, but it's not completely closed off.
So it'd be like a small wrought iron fence or a picket fence or something like that?
Something along that line, or maybe some sort of wire mesh that has landscaping in between it. The fronts of it usually aren't as important. You're just trying to create a little bit of privacy between yourself and your neighbor there. So the side of the fences is usually what you would do at something more permanent.
That gives me a better sense of it, because I understand Councilmember Eaglehart's concern of having the building right on top of the cemetery.
Correct.
When you say 5 feet, it sounds like you're going to be right there.
Yep.
But in reality, the building is set further back. So
Correct.
I think I'm more comfortable with that. And the reason for my question about the number of trees was not so much trying to figure out, you're going caliper per caliper.
Right.
But it's really, what does this feel like, particularly on the ground? And in some cases, it's more important to have shrubs than it is even to have trees. So can you talk a little bit about what your vision is for the landscaping in that buffer area and how that could potentially set that area apart? The mayor mentioned trying to separate the public and the private realm, which I agree, I think is important. That can be done with a fence, or it can be done with proper landscaping. Have you thought to that level of how that would potentially look?
Yeah, I do. Hold on one second. Can you guys see this? So this eastern edge of our property line here, you can see we've put together kind of our first conceptual landscape plan, which is showing heavy plantings in this area here, as well as some plantings on this property line, which you see there. What we're calling out on these areas are some evergreens to provide that shielding and that buffer on a year-round basis. That's where I would imagine we would have the potential for some sort of split rail type fence that would break the actual property line itself there. As far as getting into more detail than what the kind of planting requirements, we haven't taken that step yet, just because of where we are in the process. But we'll make sure when we go through the appropriate LDP process that this is something that we put a lot of focus on. But as far as me describing what we envision this or what we feel like this is if you were standing in the cemetery and you're facing towards our buildings over there, it would be possible low fence, whether it be split rail or wrought iron type scenario, some smaller bushing green space behind that, and then some larger trees to break up the massing of our building from that standpoint. They will be 3 stories tall, so you're looking at close to 35 feet from that standpoint. So we don't want to end up with an entire facade that's exposed from the cemetery side. Some landscaping that helps break that facade up.
And I think having the townhouses turn the way they are, I think will help that as well, because you don't have a long stretch of townhouses, so I appreciate that as well. You have a single row in that 5-foot buffer area. Is there potential to make that a double row of trees to really provide a little heftier buffer there?
Yeah, there's room for it. There's we've got a lot of leeway right now in between our sidewalks and our courtyards there, so that sidewalk could be moved to adjust for additional landscaping. And when we finalize our plan with our landscape architect, we're going to make sure that there's a balance there of how wide this space actually ends up. We don't want to feel like we're forcing plantings into the area, but there's definitely room for a second row if need be.
Okay, thank you. Oh, one last question, actually. In your tree recompense plan, it said the minimum heights of these trees will be 12 to 14 feet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Councilmember Price.
Yes, in the packet, the city put together, Community Development Department, page 13 of 17, there's a paragraph that states, section 13.4.8 of the UDC states that the City Council will not approve a concurrent variance unless there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions or practical difficulties pertaining to the particular piece of property in question because of its size, shape, or topography that are not applicable to other properties in the same zoning district. How do you respond to that statement? I'm sure you've seen that. And maybe Mr. Townsend might weigh in also, perhaps.
First. How we kind of envision that and how it ties into our project and what makes us special is we do buffer an historic cemetery. I think the civic space requirements relate to government buildings, school buildings, park spaces. There's not I'm not sure if there's any other properties that are similar into ours where they abut an historic cemetery. So that's where we're looking at the special circumstances.
Any other questions?
So in other words, the main reason is that it's the use of the adjacent property as opposed to anything else.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions council may have before we open up for public comment? Thank you, sir. You'll have an opportunity for rebuttal. That rebuttal will be limited to responding to points brought up by the public comment. If you have any comments or questions regarding this petition for rezoning and variance, it's your time to be heard. If you raise your hand, I'll recognize you. Anyone wish to speak? Yes, sir. Come forward. If you give us your name and address, we have a 5-minute time limit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric Schumacher, 145 Prospect Street. Would you allow me more than 5 minutes tonight?
Try to finish up in 5 minutes and we'll see where we go.
Thank you very much. How do we turn this on here? It's on? Okay, great. So I live about 100 feet from this particular property. And as you know, I've been involved with the UDC a little bit. I've noticed that we have a requirement for a mailing for a public hearing, and it needs to be mailed out at least 15 days, but not more than 45 days prior to the public hearing. That did not happen for this public hearing. So we've heard a little bit about the sewer, and I understand that the neighbors have an agreement on that, but we still don't have a letter from Fulton County saying that there is sufficient infrastructure for that. They've identified the sewer itself, but there's not sufficient infrastructure. Also in the staff report, it mentioned that there may not be sufficient infrastructure for schools for the potential children that would live in this development. I spoke with the fire marshal last week, and he was concerned that we don't have a 26-foot wide street on the site plan. He was told it was 26. It's actually not on the site plan that I saw. That might be something we need to address. So there's not a lot of parking in the development. I say we should ensure, because of the narrowness of the streets and the mass that we're putting on this property, that we have no parking signs in the development. The streets in the development are marked alleys. That's a problem according to the UDC. I'm sure you guys have seen most of this. It's been part of your packets. We require a primary street entrance for these houses. I know everybody's talking about them being rear entry, but then in fact there is no street on the rear, so they can't be rear entry. So we do have an archaeological site with the cemetery. I want to ensure that we do follow this and ensure that we incorporate the HPC in the process before we do get a land disturbance permit. So as far as a map update goes, we have an item in here that says that we need to have a substantial reason why this property can't be used under the current zoning. I don't think that we've heard that tonight. So I heard that the applicant did not find any graves. According to their survey document, they only looked within the fence line, but in fact, the fence line is inside the property line on the survey, and this is in fact what those graves look like in that area, and that orange extension cord is running along the property line. Looks like this. So these graves here are inside the property line. So I know that the applicant says that they're sensitive to the fact this is a cemetery, and I heard the mayor and other folks on council talking about adding some connectivity. Now, I want to point out that the applicant actually had an original drawing showing some connectivity, but in fact, that connectivity goes straight over existing graves. So while they're sensitive, they're not sensitive enough to actually look to see what's there before they draw connectivity. So I can show you from the document from the Historical Society that there are plenty of graves in that particular area. So this is 110 Woodstock. And these are all the graves. So we really can't get connectivity in any meaningful way without at least walking over graves. We haven't actually done any GPR in here. The 2008 Jaeger report says that we potentially have graves under the pathway that was created on private property by the city, maybe in the 80s, for connectivity to the old Roswell High School. So I would be concerned about doing that in this area. Now, I know that the mayor is not that concerned about disturbing any of our residents here with reduced buffers, but I talked to a resident today that has family here and has been maintaining a grave for 56 years and was just appalled by what he was hearing about 3-story brownstones going up in this area. He thought it was completely inappropriate. So we do have families in this area, including, I think, Mayor Wood, I think you have some family in this particular cemetery according to this document. We have other families that are concerned about this area. It's historic. It's not a place to be building downtown-style brownstone townhouses. Now, I live in this area here, okay? When I moved here, I did some investigation into the zoning here, and it's R2. I had an expectation that that would happen, R2, when it was developed. I'm not against some development here. I'm not actually against some townhouses, but 21 townhouses with no parking, where they're going to potentially be using our parking lot for off-site parking because they've only got, say, 7 parking spots in the whole development outside of their garages. I'm hugely concerned about what this is actually going to look like for this historic cemetery. I think we need to fulfill the buffer requirements that we put in the UDC. Now, this came in between the first and second reading of the UDC. So I think there was a very good reason why we added them. I had long conversations with Brad Townsend during the UDC work sessions about what civic actually meant, because we took all properties that were historic, churches, everything, and made them civic, and there were no buffers. We got buffers between the first and second reading because that's meaningful for the kinds of places we mark civic, historic places. This is a historic place. This is about respect. Putting up tall buildings directly next to historic graves isn't respectful. I mean, I do live here. In fact, Mayor, you spoke in '99 against high-density development in this area. You reduced it to 5 single-family homes from what, the 13 that they originally wanted. Jerry, you were here when that happened. I don't think we need to go to 21 townhouses in this area. I think we can eliminate some. I think we need to think about what that's going to mean for the parking that we have at the park and the neighborhood.
Try to wrap up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir, come forward.
My name is Tom Moore. I live at 1232 Minhinnet Drive. I am the HOA president of the old place, which is directly behind the soccer fields there. So I am one of the people that he approached and proactively brought his plan and asked for our concerns and comments. I circulated around my homeowners, and we came back with nothing. We would love to have that development. I think it would help the neighborhood a lot. And from the caliber of development they've done so far, we have complete confidence. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, come forward, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Lori Henry. I live at 1195 Minhinnet Drive, and I'm also speaking on behalf of our HOA Townsend Place. We have been working with Brendan Walsh. It was a rocky start, but it's been a good relationship since then. We have come to agreements, conditions between his development and ours. One thing that I am concerned about is that we had agreed that our agreement would be a condition of rezoning. And the reason why I wanted that condition of rezoning is because we have agreements that your staff needs to understand as they're policing this development. And unless we have that tied to the site plan, your staff is not privy to those agreements, which could cause them to make inappropriate decisions on the site. So I am requesting that that be put in as a condition of the rezoning as well. But we are supporting the project. We think they'll be great neighbors, and we look forward to them in the neighborhood.
Councilmember Wynn, was it your intention to make these this private agreement a condition of rezoning?
I'm going to defer to my attorney who suggested that I had him read it into the record. So, Ms. Henry, I'm just going to defer to Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson, you need to explain to us the legal technicalities of condition or not condition, and what your recommendation is?
You can't subject his property to conditions that are not on his property. So we can't enforce a private agreement. So
Right.
we wouldn't be able to. So if it's something having to do with his property that he's in agreement to do with, we could do that. But we can't do anything outside of his property. So
So
there's
are there-
nothing we can
Are
enforce.
there conditions within this private agreement that are on the applicant's property? Or some of these conditions can be enforceable? Councilmember Wynn.
Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Rollator had a hard copy, and I saw that. I think there's maybe a couple, maybe with stormwater, that we can look at.
The stormwater and the trees, and what my concern is.
And let me just finish real quick, Ms. Henry, I'm sorry, but I think Brandon needs to address this, that I was going to get to the critical root zones. I think if those root zones are on his property, then I think we can enforce you wanted to bore under instead of cutting across. So I don't know if it would be good for us to, I'm going to have to ask the attorney for language about if what's ever in that agreement, what we can carry on to as a condition of zoning, or if we need to look at it real quick and see what we can get out of there.
So, Mr. Davidson, is it a possibility to adopt as a condition of zoning those portions of the agreement that do affect the applicant's property?
The parts that are on his property, yes, if he's in agreement, that would be.
Is the applicant in agreement with that? Ms. Henry, does that seems to be the best we can do?
Just a point of clarification, though. I'm just anticipating something. So we've got construction on my property, and the arborist comes out, or the engineer comes out, or whoever comes out, and they say, oh, no, you can do this because this is our ordinance. But they don't understand that we have an agreement that is going above and beyond what the ordinance requires. I just want to make sure that staff is on notice that there is a private agreement, so that they're not enforcing a standard ordinance where...
I think staff is now on notice.
Okay, well, will that translate into the field?
Well,
or is
as I understand
staff going to go back and listen to these minutes?
You know, in trying to understand the context of the request and the limitations, it will be aware of this. But as far as enforcement of the private agreement, I don't think we're in a position to enforce it.
I'm not asking you to enforce it. I'm asking you to make sure staff is aware of it.
Ms. Henry, can I just do Mr. Rollator, you have copies of that for us, please? Can we, because my understanding was going to be an agreement, so I did not have it passed out. But if we're looking at certain parts to be conditions of zoning, I'd like my colleagues to see what we're talking about.
Terrific.
So if you just give us just about 30 seconds.
Thanks. I'll sit down.
You don't have to sit down. I just, just gives us time just to pass it out.
To answer your second question, I think council is has personal knowledge of the existence of this agreement now, and I don't think there'll be any question about awareness of the agreement. I think we're back to which portions of this agreement may be adopted as conditions, and I think it's appropriate if we could identify those conditions so council recognizes what conditions they're opposing, and the applicant recognizes which conditions are being imposed. If this goes forward, I think it's appropriate to go through that exercise. So, Mr. Rollator, if you're representing the applicant, if you could take a quick look at it. Mr. Davidson, if you could take a quick look at it, we'll get back to you. But at this time, I'd like to, unless you have other questions, I'm going to see if there's anyone else with any comments.
I'm good, thanks.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, come forward, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Chipper Gronholm, 4951 Laurel Springs Drive, Roswell, Georgia. First property I got involved in management of was in Townsend Place when I just came back from college and started my little business here in town, and have managed that piece ever since at Minhinnet. 1195, we're on the north part of this development. I think that Lehigh's track record says a lot. They have salvaged a project on Canton Street that was sitting vacant and produced a great product. You know, as long as you know, they can kind of build a nice buffer and not have lights coming in, you know, to that development, Townsend Place, I think that I would support the rezoning and the concurrent variances. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to have any questions or comments? This time we'll allow the applicant to respond to any rebuttal that it has, and then we'll try to address what possible conditions it is possible to impose that are on the applicant's property.
So just to address some of the concerns that I heard here, looking through my notes, as far as we do have a letter from Fulton County which shows there is availability of sewer in the area and capacity of sewer in the area, and we can provide that after this meeting. As far as children in the school system in this development, I mentioned Providence and Historic Roswell. We sold 35 units in that development. I think there were 3 household formations that had school-aged children. The majority of our residents, our market is generally empty nesters or young professionals. As far as the site plan goes in reference to meeting fire codes, we've worked very closely with city staff, our PE, our professional engineer, in doing so and making sure what we're showing here as plan is up to code, and we'll continue to do that through the LDP process. As far as parking goes, I believe the UDC calls out a 2.25 or 2.25 spots per unit, which we exceed with the 2 parking spots in every unit and then the additional guest parking that we've shown on the site plan. As far as the need of changing this property from single RS12 or single family homes to RTH, it really sits on an island by itself right now, as it's only abutting active residents or townhome residents themselves. We feel it's much better suited as a townhome development itself. As far as the proposed connectivity, I think the drawing that was shown, we could re-look at that area. There's definitely 2 possibilities on the northeast corner, though, where that connection could be made at a future time. As far as respecting the, can I have the PowerPoint back up, Brad? As far as respecting and what we're doing and showing the cemetery and providing great design around the cemetery, I think what Eric is saying I agree with, and we want to provide that. I think we just have a different of opinions of what he's looking for and what we're looking for. His idea of what he wants to do beside the cemetery looks something a little more like this, which is you know, somewhat rigid with 2 different fence systems. We're looking to do something that's a little softer with the landscaping and the split rail system that we talked about earlier. As far as the conditions, I'll let Don sort that out, but I think Lori knows our intentions here from that standpoint and what we're trying to do. I don't know if it's read into the record, if it can then be enforceable, but the document that we've presented to you guys is what we intend to follow through on. I'm have to advise here from a legal standpoint of how that can be worked out, though.
Thank you, sir. Does the council have any other questions other than on this conditions of zoning, which we're going to try to address next?
That's what I was going to address.
I do have one question. A question was raised regarding did the city meet the notice requirements? If staff could tell us what steps were taken to meet the notice requirement.
Proper mailing, posting, and notice.
If you'll explain what proper mailing is and to whom and when.
Postcards were sent to residents within 300 feet of the property to identify when the neighborhood meeting, the planning commission meeting, and the council meeting would be, and all public hearings. That was also included in the local newspaper and posted on a sign on the property.
Was that timely sent out under the statute?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. If we could have someone help us with what of these conditions in the agreement could potentially be made conditions of this zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rollard, I think I have them, but I'm going to make sure. I do have a question on 4 and 5, which is the 6-foot privacy fence. And is that going to be on your property, or is it going to be on Ms. Henry's and the homeowners association property, the fence?
It'd actually be on the HOA and Ms. Henry's property, so we'd have a construction easement for us to install that fence.
Okay, that's on both 4 and 5? The entire southern proper boundary, and then a 6-foot privacy fence along the rear and side yard of Ms. Henry's property? So
Correct.
those are both on?
That's off-site. So that
Off-site.
could not be
Off-site,
made
yes, I'm
condition.
sorry, off-site, yes.
So according to, and Mr. Rollator, if you want to do this, it looks like number 2 is the one that we can enforce, which is the applicant's arborist will consult with Kevin Caldwell, that one about boring underneath the critical root zone, because that would be on your property. So what we're looking at is that's the only one that the city of Roswell can enforce. Am I correct on that, Mr. Rollator? And tell me if I'm wrong. You won't hurt my feelings.
I'm Don Rollator, 198 Bear Creek Point, Jasper, Georgia, 30143. I have some thoughts that I will share with you and the city attorney where it affects this property and benefits it, and I think we may want to consider it. First of all, let me state that this is a private agreement that was negotiated at arm's length with the counsel involved for both parties. We acknowledge on the record and understand you're going to place a copy of this agreement on the record, the terms of that agreement, and we intend to be bound by the terms of them for the benefit of our other party. My thought is, in number 1, to the extent it grants a sewer easement to this property, I think it may be enforceable to the city because this property cannot be constructed without it. But I'll defer to the city attorney. On number 3, it grants a stormwater easement, drainage easement, so that we can manage the water that's now free-flowing from the parking lot and the water tank and the radio tower across our property onto theirs. That is a benefit to this property. And again, I would defer to the city attorney, but that may be enforceable. And number 7, where they agree to execute the sewer easement, stormwater drainage easement in form and substance acceptable to Fulton County, that just kind of supports the 2 that I have commented on. So those are my thoughts. Other than that, I would certainly defer to you and to Mr. Davidson to make a final determination with the understanding that we acknowledge that we entered into this agreement freely and voluntarily, as did the other party.
Mr. Davidson, do you have opinion as to which of these conditions can be adopted as conditions of zoning?
I think number 2 can.
Tell us what number 2 is.
The applicant's arborist will consult with Kevin Caldwell, Lori Henry's arborist, regarding the 3 specimen trees on Lori Henry's property during the land disturbance permitting process in the city of Roswell. Kevin Caldwell will coordinate construction and prescription as it affects the 3 specimen trees. Such prescription may include boring in lieu of trenching. Applicant shall obtain a 5-year bond on the 3 specimen trees.
All right, so 2 can be made a condition.
I do not think 3 can, because we can't make Lori Henry or the homeowners association grant anything.
All right.
What was the other one you said? Sorry, 7? And we can't make them agree to execute any kind of sewer easement either.
So 2 is we can make 2 a condition, and you believe that's the only one we can make a condition. Ms. Henry, did you have any other questions or comments? Thank you. Does the council have any other questions or comments regarding these conditions? Councilmember Diamond.
What I'm hearing is a concern, not so much for the legal enforceability, but just an awareness of what the conditions are. Is it feasible that we can just make sure that this goes into the file for the inspectors and anybody that goes on site?
Yes. Consider it done.
That help?
I think we can excuse me, but I think we can red flag this somehow and make sure that maybe it is at the construction site and wherever the inspectors will have a copy of it.
Yes.
Be glad to do that. I think that's, we can do that. Okay.
We can certainly do that.
Okay. And one other thing, on number 7, please spell Miss Henry's name right. It's L-O-R-I and not L-A-U-R-I if you want it to be correct.
I'm going to blame that on John Monroe.
No. In fact, you've got it spelled everywhere else correctly except for that, and we just want to make sure that everything is above board, and we would like to have Miss Henry's name spelled correctly, L-O-R-I. Thank you.
All right. Any comments from council or questions before we entertain a motion? Do we have a motion?
Yes, sir. Move to approve, let me find my little notes here. Move to approve RZ 201400970, CV 201400974 Wanted Woodstock Road, with the conditions, added conditions that the applicant will provide a stub out of the trail, to consider alternative type of fencing on the east side, add a double row of evergreens on the side with the 5-foot buffer as approved by the city arborist, and to include the number 2 on the private agreement that is applicable to Mr. Caldwell, conversing with your arborist to make sure that about the boring or the trenching of the trees. So that's the number 2 that's on the private agreement. And I think, and we do have one staff recommendation, and that there's no guarantee that the number of townhome units shown on the rezoning site plan will be achieved. And so that is that is approval of the zoning and the concurrent variances with the 5 added conditions.
Motion for approval by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. This time we'll entertain questions or comments. Councilmember Price.
The condition number 5, that there would be no guarantee of the number of units, I thought that was related to if the concurrent variance was not approved. So why would we include that in this instance?
Staff, you one who recommended that, so if we could hear from you.
It's a mandatory. I mean, we put it on all of them, but I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that this is something that we are now adding to, because when somebody asks for 21 units, they might be able to put it in 18 or 17. So it's something that we're now adding to all of our rezoning applications, and I just want to make Mayor and Council aware that that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we entertain a motion? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Walsh, I like the site plan. I think you've done a lot of hard work on this, and I think it's going to be a great project. And I just want to compliment you and the neighbors for working together. It's always important for projects like this for people to work together, and I appreciate the spirit of cooperation that you entered into, and the neighbors as well who were willing to meet with you. So thank you for doing that, and thanks for getting everybody together.
Do we have a motion?
We already have a motion.
Oh, we already have a motion. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Real quick, Mr. Mayor, I do want to commend Mr. Walsh and Mr. Rollator and their company with getting with Ms. Henry and the HOAs and working this out. I think it's going to be a great project, and I would ask you very sincerely to make sure that you keep the HOA and Ms. Henry in the loop of everything that you're doing. But it's a great project, and thank you for bringing it forward.
All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. That's unanimous. I'm going to take a 10-minute break.
Thank you for your time.
Jackie? Planning Commission? When?
That makes November 10th. Oh, no, wait, the one taken in October.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm going to do this with one of my council members missing. This is an initiation of a map amendment to the property located on Old Ellis Road and Old Roswell Road. It's be presented by Mr. Townsend.
This was discussed at the ComDev Transportation Committee meeting. This issue was brought forward by Roswell, Inc. The property in question is known as the Spruill Tract on Old Roswell Road in Ellis. It was approved as part of the Unified Development Code with a 3-story height limit. Roswell, Inc. was representing that the desire for this property to be identified with an 8-story. This would be initiation of a map amendment. The discussion has been that this would be initiated. We would send notices, public hearing, and post the property for the Planning Commission meeting on October 21st, and then have a meeting on October 27th for the council to deal with the map amendment. If you have any questions.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. A motion to move forward the initiation of a map amendment on Old Ellis Road and Old Roswell Road.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, my understanding is the reason for this was the applicant is interested in potential office here.
Yes.
And under commercial mixed use, since this is all new, refresh my memory, office is allowed under CX?
Correct.
Okay. And they would not need to do multiple uses necessarily, but they could do all office buildings if they wanted to?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The next one is approval of Sidewalk Cafe license SC 17404 for 14 Elizabeth Way, Fix Pizzeria. Mr. Townsend.
This is a proposed sidewalk cafe license along the front facade of 14 Elizabeth Way. This is the location of the building circled, as you can see it from Alpharetta Highway. This is the location of the sidewalk cafe. As you can see, the proposed would be a 3-foot area in which there would be single tables. That way there would be remaining a 5-foot walkway path along Elizabeth Way. We would be removing the bench from that location. This is the other angle of where the sidewalk cafe would be located. This is the proposed chain and post that are being proposed for this location. This would match the east-west alley proposal in the look of the sidewalk cafe. This is the graphic diagram showing the table setup, the front door, the locations of the posts for this location. These are the recommended conditions from staff for the approval for the sidewalk cafe. Staff would recommend approval with these conditions.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Orleans.
Brad, just a couple of quick things, and there's still the 5-foot still there, even with that brick wall.
Yes.
And the fence, yeah, that picture.
I think the bricks hang over on the corner a little bit. I mean, not that much.
Go back to the fence picture. Now, that's the fence that was approved, I think, in front of Zest.
Yes.
And this fence isn't the one where you can clip on and clip off easily?
That's what we're trying to, yes.
Yeah, because that's some of the issues on...
We're trying to make it more secure that the chains do not be removed.
Right. Okay, very good. That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Mr. Townsend, could you go back to the photograph? Yeah. Okay. So, where is the 5-foot dimension? Can you, I guess you can't really point. There you go.
This is the 3-foot area. This is the 5-foot area.
So the bench would have to be removed?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and the bench, I assume, is whoever owns that is okay with that being removed?
And I think that's city ownership, so I think we're fine.
So
with
that's a city bench?
where it's been put there for so long, I'm not sure anybody really owns it.
Okay, so we will relocate that? All right, thank you.
Was that a question, Councilmember Price?
Is it a historical society?
I do not know.
That does not appear to be the Historic Society form. It looks like the city bench to me.
I mean, it doesn't have a, in honor of or property of or anything on it, so I don't know.
The Historic Society benches all have plaques.
And is it affixed or is it loose?
I think it's loose. It will be loose.
We'll find a good home for it.
We'll find an appropriate spot for it.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, approval of Sidewalk Cafe license for 14 Elizabeth Way Fixed Pizzeria with the 5 conditions recommended by staff.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The next one is approval of a text amendment to the UDC Section 10.2 Landscaping and Screening, Section 10.2.3 Neighborhood Compatibility Buffer Table. This will be the second reading. Mr. Townsend.
Yes, this is the second reading in reference to the buffers required for PRDs. This is the simplified language that has been batted around. It is for the council to determine whether it needs further clarification or amendments, but it has been reviewed by staff and by legal to meet the requirements of, we believe, your intent of how PRD buffers would be required. If you have any questions.
Does the council have any questions? I see no questions. Do we have a motion? Oh, we need a reading of the first reading.
Second reading.
Second reading.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 10 of the Unified Development Code, Section 10.2.3, to add the CD buffer requirement between new projects PRD and existing PRDs. Now, therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Article 10, Site Development, Section 10.2, Landscaping and Screening, Section 10.2.3, Neighborhood Compatibility Buffers Table, to add under the new project PRD row and existing adjacent PRD add star in the column. Star PRD buffer is based on existing development, and the size of the proposed PRD buffer shall meet or exceed the requirements for similar size existing abutting lots identified by the district in Table 10.2.3. And have approved this to be the second reading.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I think we might have a question before I want to
Do we have a
make
question? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Townsend, can you explain to me what this means?
Good luck.
The size of the buffer that is required for a new proposed PRD would be reviewed in a manner and adopted by council in looking at the existing PRD lot size. So adjacent buffers would be similar as well as lot sizes, and that would how the PRD would be brought forward and reviewed by council in determining whether it was appropriate or not.
All right, so the buffer on the proposed property is based on the lot sizes
in the existing PRD
versus the lot sizes of the proposed.
Right.
So it's really not based on what the other buffer is. It's really based on the lot sizes on either side of that property line.
Correct.
Okay, because I'm not sure that that is what this says. It really talks more about the buffers. We're in agreement on what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure the language is correct. To me, it's still a little confusing.
Okay.
Shall propose the PRD to
proposed RD shall meet or exceed, take out buffer.
Well, it's really the PRD buffer is based on the lot sizes of the existing development compared to the lot sizes of the proposed development. And I think it's that simple.
And you don't believe what's written does that?
Well, you talk about you're comparing buffers, not the lot sizes.
Right.
No, buffers are different than lot sizes.
But the buffers are determined by the lot.
The buffers are determined by lot sizes.
Yes.
Okay, so if this is.
There may not be a buffer, though, on the existing development.
Would you feel more comfortable, it says in the size of the proposed PRD buffer and abutting lots shall meet or exceed the requirements? I mean, how do you feel that it should be worded to make it clearer?
Here's where we are. If we need to go back and wordsmith
Yeah.
this, perhaps we need to defer it. If the council is not comfortable with the wording, rather than trying to wordsmith it on the fly, perhaps I'm not aware of any urgency in passing this. There's
No.
nothing pending.
That's correct.
So if the council has a simple answer, it'd be wonderful to get to it. If council feels it needs to be studied further, I would recommend a deferral.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is it possible to defer this, Mr. Davidson?
Jackie?
Yes.
Okay, then my motion, Mr. Mayor, is to defer until the next ComDev agenda, which would be October 13th.
Motion to defer the second reading by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DePolito. All in favor of the motion? Councilmember Price.
So will we see this again at committee or just come back here?
Back to council.
I will make sure that Mr. Townsend sends it out in an appropriate time so everybody can read it. And again, we did this, I think we sent it out 2 weeks ago or something like that, and to let everybody look at it and be able to comment on the new wording.
So the answer is it is not planned to go back to committee at this time, but on the other hand, if there's a lot more discussion, it may be appropriate to take it to committee.
Yes, sir.
I'm hopeful that the council is going to come forward with clarity and consensus. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to defer, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Okay, on a roll here. Initiation of a text amendment to Article 12.7 flood damage prevention and Article 13.11 variance on the UDC. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm not used to saying that. Hello, Mark.
Here I am. Thank you. So this is an initiation of a text amendment to Article 12.7, which is flood damage protection. It basically revises the UDC section to reflect changes that FEMA requested of the Metro Water District flood plain ordinance, which our ordinance is based on.
So
it's
we're making a revision to comply with state law.
Correct.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to initiate the text amendment for the flood damage prevention.
Motion by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Was that a second? No? Yes? Yes. Motion second by Councilmember Diamond. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion or questions by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Okay, the next one is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell ordinances, Article 10.15, mobile food vendors, to add mobile retail vendors. This will be the first reading as presented by Ms. Wakefield.
Okay. This is the first reading of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinance to allow for mobile retail vendings. The proposal is to treat these vendors similar to what we do for mobile food vendors. This will deal with private properties. You will not be able to sell from your trunk of your car. There has to be a legitimate mobile vehicle that would that the vendor would use. They would have to obtain a permit from the City of Roswell, and this is the first reading, and staff's recommendation is approval. I would like to say that if the first reading is approved, staff will come back at the second reading to provide a resolution to set the fee for the permit.
Any questions? Mr. Davidson, do you need to read this, or is this just a, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 10 of the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances regarding licensing and regulation of mobile food and retail vendors. Now therefore, pursuant to their authority, the mayor and city council adopt the following ordinance. Chapter 10, licenses, taxes, and business regulations of the Roswell Code of Ordinances is hereby amended by amending Section 10.15 mobile food vendors to read as follows. Text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this would be the first reading.
Do we have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve the, excuse me, first reading for the amendment to the city code for mobile food vendors to add mobile retail vendors.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Councilmember Price.
On page 2, under F, the line, or the words, but not limited to, I'm just trying to think to myself what problems we could get into by having completely unlimited items for sale at this retail mobile unit, because it's describing, you know, clothing, jewelry, and other fashion accessories, and I don't know if our intent was to limit it to those things, or if we felt that was too restrictive.
I believe the intent of that particular sentence is to imply that the sales from a trunk sale, from the trunk of your car, would be prohibited. I think it says not limited to, because that gives us the latitude to make a call if there's some other type of vehicle that someone tries to sell from.
Oh, I thought it meant the types of items being sold.
No, it says sales and any tangible items from an automobile, to include but not limited to trunk sales are prohibited. The back seat of the car, for example.
So
Oh, no, I'm sorry,
It's prohibited, yes.
We're looking at a different, to include but not limited to. I'm looking at the one of the second line, where it's describing the types of things being sold. We define them sort of narrowly, but then we say it's not limited to those things.
Tangible items.
It could be clothing, jewelry,
Watches.
shoes, my favorite, purses. It's
Well, I
just
mean,
retail sales.
Could it be, you know, model trains? I mean, could it
be?
Could be, yes,
So
ma'am.
we're basically saying anything.
Again,
Well,
I think we have to have some
Out of
judgment.
there. That'd be
Well,
limited by
yes.
state law.
I mean, I guess what my point is, why are we saying anything if we're just saying you can sell anything?
Well, we are saying tangible items. It's not, it has to be, you can't sell stocks and bonds out of the back of out of the truck.
Right, but I mean, you could sell children's toys, children's clothes, you could sell anything.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Davidson would like to give us some direction here. Mr. Davidson.
I think we can address some of your concern maybe by saying that they can't sell anything that's not already allowed under our ordinances out of it, and that would prohibit the sale of adult novelty items and such.
So it'd have to be limited to things that you can sell at a retail store?
Right, within the city.
So you can add that language to the second reading. Thank you for bringing that point up, Councilmember Price.
You're so welcome.
Any other questions or comments? We have a motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the first reading, raise their hands. That's the far right. Far right, we're at first reading. Mr. Orleans. How far right can you be? All the way to the right. Are you for or abstaining or against?
You haven't gotten to the against yet.
All right, that would be in favor, would be Price, Eigelhart, Wynn, DiPolito, and Diamond. All opposed? That would be Councilman Orleans. The first reading passes 5-1.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, this is my last one. Amendment to the tree planting replacement master plan for 2004 to 2015 and approval of budget amendment with all those numbers in the amount of $40,000. Ms. Wakefield.
This is a request to amend the tree curb planting and replacement master plan to add 2 additional sites at the request of the Environmental and Public Works Department. The first being the Stormwater Wetlands Best Management Practices for the Roswell Area Park for an amount of $20,000. The second being the Water Treatment Plant Bioretention Area in the amount of $20,000.
Any questions for staff? Do we have a motion?
Motion, excuse me, motion to approve the amendment to the tree planting replacement master plan.
Motion by Councilmember Wynn for approval. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Eigelhart. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Diamond.
Yes, sir. Alice, on number 18, the 92 median Bentgrass to Crabapple is listed as a project list that's completed, and those either died in that time frame or missed something, but can we put them back on?
Yes, ma'am. We'll go back and have staff to reevaluate those.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Price.
Yes, I want to implore, and it sort of piggybacks on what Councilmember Diamond just said. The medians of 92 are particularly of concern to many people who call me regularly and wish that we had a more attractive median on 92. And I appreciate that this is well, primarily replacement, but it's also new trees, is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So if we have any monies left in that fund, or we have any leeway in the location of said trees beyond what we have here, particularly number 41, that we put as many new trees, because number 41 just says replacement, on 92.
Anything further?
Yes.
No, sir, I'm finished.
All right. Do we have a motion and a second? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That is unanimous. This time we'll hear from our liaison to our Transportation Department, Councilmember Nancy Diamond.
Thank you, sir. Would you like the consent item first or last?
That's your call.
All right, well, Steve, if you're okay with doing consent item number 3 first, we can knock that out. This is approval of a policy on high school mascots painted on public roads. Mr. Asenbrock's here.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, good evening. Happy to answer any questions, but we had talked about, we had a request come through, specifically Roswell High School. It asked about painting mascots on the public right-of-way. We inquired about other municipalities, specifically our neighbors to the left and right, Cobb County, Gwinnett County. We got some feedback from them. We came up with a draft policy, and we're prepared to do the draft policy. It's essentially that we've limited it to high schools, and we said that the high school will basically make an application to the Roswell transportation staff, basically outline their proposal. We will approve it. They will hire a contractor. They will have them put in. They will refresh them as they are needed, and if they choose not to do them, they will be required to eradicate them. So it's a pretty basic policy, and we're prepared to execute that as you approve it.
Just a clarification, is this applied to public and private high schools?
It is, Mayor. You clarified that? But it's limited to high schools, so that was the issue. Okay, so public and private, as they apply,
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Do you have a question?
Councilmember Price.
Okay, what is the procedure then if a school wants to do it? What,
They will make an application to the department.
Okay,
There's
what-
basically a right-of-way encroachment form.
okay, so number 4 is number 4, it just seems like there's no ability for the staff to either reject or what have you. It looks like they can just provide the drawings and then we have to do it.
No. I mean, anytime somebody provides us with a drawing and a concept, we work with them. If they come in and said, we'd like to do half a mile in each direction, we'd probably say no. We'd probably say, look, you could do, a couple hundred feet in each direction, in each lane approaching the stadium. So we will work with them. And if you'd like to, to add further guidance to the staff, that's fine. But we think we perfectly understand what your intent is, and we do these encroachment permits all the time.
Okay, as we spoke earlier, I've seen some schools where it's gotten carried away.
Sure.
So I don't know whether they just didn't know how to say no, or whether they're
One thing that might be of consideration, if you'd like to amend this to say something like mascot symbols will be limited to 200 or 300 feet in each direction approaching the stadium, or something like that, to help us guide the efforts of the school, that'd be fine. But I mean, it's really not necessary as far as I'm concerned. We're anticipating 3 or 4 or 5 mascots, appropriately spaced in each travel lane as it approached the stadium, and that's really the extent of our understanding of your guidance for this policy.
in one entrance or multiple entrances?
Well, it's the stadium is the issue. It's a booster club kind of a thing. So whatever the main road is off of the stadium. It's a school spirit.
Yeah, they can be very nicely done, but they can also be very overdone.
Sure.
And when they're overdone, they're really very distracting to the drivers and could even...
What if we did this? It's too late, Whatever we do, we're going to have to treat each high school the same.
Yes, sir.
We're certainly not want to have, we want to, so my recommendation is why don't you get with the high schools who are requesting this? Come forward with the guidelines. And then you can adopt the guidelines to go along with this policy, and the council will be comfortable. But I think my biggest concern is not whether it's too much or too little, is that one gets treated differently than the other one, and that's when we get in trouble. So perhaps, if I think it's appropriate to develop guidelines and say you all have to follow it, and so maybe we adopt the guidelines on the front end after a discussion with the high schools, and then council has a comfort level of what's being approved. Councilmember Love.
No, not council member, but city administrator.
City Administrator Love.
I couldn't get elected. I think one of the, and we certainly intend to treat everybody consistently, but I think there's a time sensitivity to this because we do have a request from Roswell High School, is my understanding. So if we could get some type of clarification and perhaps get this approved in some fashion tonight, it would allow them to proceed.
I'm fine with approving it. I just want to make it clear that whatever we do for one high school, we do for the other.
Then perhaps the simple way to do would simply to add to number 4 that the icons or the graphics are limited to 300 feet in either direction of the entrance, and that pretty much creates a geographic limiting factor that it will be easy for us to apply to every situation, if you think that we need that clarification.
Councilmember Orleans.
Steve, I just wanted to clarify, you're talking in referencing stadiums, yet this does say stenciling is only allowed on the public roads at or near the main school entrance. So which is the intent?
Well,
I think the intention is within 300 feet of the main school entrance.
Well, it could be, we could be the main school entrance or the stadium. I mean, I would defer to the school. If they have a certain reason why, for instance, it's Centennial, if they want the entrance to be the focus versus the stadium, I mean, it's not really our call to tell them where to do it. It's really our call to just sort of, as the mayor pointed out, make sure it's uniformly applied. So I don't really care whether it's this, I mean, I assumed it was the stadium from a booster standpoint.
What if we said the main
Maybe
entrance?
what you could just do is, on the right-of-way within the property lines of the school.
Well,
So they
some
can-
schools have more property lines than
Yeah,
other
because-
ones, and then they get into a
Say
hissy
for
about
Roswell
that.
High, for instance, you've got Hardscrabble and King. My thought was that this would just be on King. There's no reason for this to be on Hardscrabble.
I mean, you can say on one right-of-way.
Well, that's why we
but-
say the main entrance.
Okay, well, main entrance is fine. You were just trying to get to the stadium. The stadium may be.
Okay, sure.
different Places. I thought you were, I guess I didn't read limitation of one.
What if
the
you
way
said
were
the main
talking.
entrance is designated by the high school, and they can pick whatever their main entrance is?
Exactly, that's why, right.
So
As long as it's not my driveway.
Basically, you're saying one mascot drawing potentially on each lane, each direction.
Correct. Well,
Okay.
I'm saying there can be multiple mascots. There could be 3 or 4, let's say Roswell Hornets. So there'll be 3 or 4 Hornets on King Road leading up in one direction and 3 or 4 leading up in another direction as you approach whichever entrance they
Okay,
apply
so
for.
This does not say all that.
No, it doesn't.
That's what I think we're getting. You're saying one at the main entrance, and you're saying 3 or 4. And I mean, that's what I guess we're getting to, no consistency. So I think we
This
probably
was-
need to narrow those down to
All right.
determine it. I wouldn't think you'd want 3 or 4 at a school. I would think you'd want primarily one to identify it in each direction. But, you know, I don't know what the rest of the council thinks of it.
Councilmember Diamond.
It just seems much harder than it needs to be. I really feel like staff can handle this, but if we need to do something, maybe we, on number 3, we take away main school entrance, so that that's at the discretion of the school, which entrance they want to consider.
Okay.
And then schools are required to provide, no, that's right. And then icons limited to 300 feet on either side of the entrance, maximum of 8 total.
Fine.
Maximum what?
That's kind of cheesy, you know, if you're.
Talking about 8
Well,
mascots?
you're saying 3 or 4 on each side, that gives you 3 or 4 on each side.
Well, they're going to be about 50 feet apart, and then we have to work around the crosswalks and, you know, the other, that there's.
I'd just like to see more myself, but that's all right with y'all.
I just think we're halfway through football season and we're still messing with this, and I feel certain our staff can handle it. So that's my motion, if you didn't ask for it.
I'm fine with both of those proposals. One is to eliminate the word
Let me hear
main.
the motion again, just for clarification of council.
All right.
I guess at the
motion-
beginning of this, I didn't envision 3 or 4. I guess I was envisioning 1 or 2 instead of a proliferation of.
Well-
We're going to have a motion and then we'll have a vote. What's the motion?
Motion to approve the policy on high school mascots painting on public roads with the conditions set forth here by staff, saving number 3 where we eliminate the word main out of school entrance. And icons are limited to 300 feet on either side of the entrance with a maximum of 8 total icons.
A second.
Motion is a second. Anyone in the audience have any comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That's that's unanimous. That's unanimous.
Okay.
You can never have too many mascots, that's right. Next item is approval of a resolution to submit a local maintenance and improvement grant project list for FY 2015 to the Georgia Department of Transportation. Mr. Asenbrough.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. Annually, the Georgia General Assembly allocates funds back to municipalities. This year they allocated $120 million to the state of Georgia. Roswell's share, based on the formula of population and centerline miles, was $624,067.87. We have applied, and what we would like to recommend is 2 of our collector roads, Willio Road, this section of Willio Road between the Cobb County line and Coleman Road, and then Hardscrabble Road between King Road and Etris Road. The Willio Road will basically be used for resurfacing and restriping. The Hardscrabble Road, in this particular case, we're going to apply this funding to be the resurfacing component of our Hardscrabble Green Loop project. So that project is in right-of-way acquisition right now. We anticipate local let to be in May of next year, so we will use this LIMIG money to actually rebuild that road with the wider bike lanes, which is going to be part of the complete street that we're about to do. So this is kind of a twofer. We're getting a lot of good mileage out of this LIMIG money this year.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the resolution.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Any questions about council? Any comments from the floor? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
I did have a question. Put up.
Please.
Yes, sir.
Does that include a left turn lane at the Old Harvest Church?
It does. Yes, sir.
Next item is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with Vertical Earth for the construction of the Eves Road Complete Street project in the amount of $2,151,006.16, and approval of a budget amendment 312421010 in the amount of $1,041,885.16.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. These are the plans. I just want to show you this. This is a product of a lot of hard work. We had a combination, in this case, of a professional design company, Pond & Company, who did the majority of this project, and then our staff, which did the connection to the city park. This is a bond project, a very popular bond project, which will create Eves Road as a complete street between Eves Circle and Riverside Road. Here's a little cross-section which shows a travel lane in each direction, bike lanes, a sidewalk, and a multi-use trail. A lot of interest in this project from the public, and as soon as we approve this, we will go, after the contract documents, we will shortly we'll have a little groundbreaking ceremony and begin this construction, probably next month.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Price.
Just a comment that the Recreation Commission is fully in support of this project.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Price. Any questions or comments?
We've got lots of comments.
Come on forward. That's your opportunity.
Tried to get it from the council or somebody for a year on this. Can't seem to get anyone to respond. Whenever you're finished with your books, I don't want to.
Do you need me to move that stuff for you?
Well, I just don't want to mess up any of your papers.
Sorry to take so much.
Thank you. My name is Jason Sabatino. I've spoken with some of you in the past. I live at 735 Danbridge Way in the Horseshoe Bend subdivision. Just to give you some perspective, I don't know if this shows very well up there, but Horseshoe Bend is here. This is the estate section of Horseshoe Bend, and the project that East Roswell Connector is going to be, here. Just so you have what he has. I just want to say I appreciate everyone's time to listen to my comments here. The concern that we have is not with the Complete Street project as a whole. In fact, many of my neighbors and I are in full support of the project along Eves Road as outlined by staff. The concern we have is specifically with the East Roswell connector as it's currently proposed, and as a result of that, we're asking that the contract as it is currently in front of council not be awarded. The creation of this road is going to change the landscape of our park. This is a park that my children, ages 10 and 7, use every day. This is a reason why we moved to this home, was because of this park and how, you know, and how the park is laid out, how the resources and all are available. There's no park currently in Roswell that I've been able to identify on this scale that has multiple access. So this would be a change in how we give access to residents to our parks. I know on many occasions I've been at Roswell Area Park and wished, you know, would have been willing to pay to get out a back entrance to get out of that park, especially on a weekend when there's a lot of use. When you create this road, you need to understand that you're going to be increasing access to the park. As a resident that backs up to the park, I have to deal with all kinds of activities that go on in the park. I deal with people driving through the park at all hours of the night, making noise. I deal with people drinking back behind my house in the park. We've found drug paraphernalia in the park. We've found other adult-oriented paraphernalia in the park. I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, my kids, they go out and they pick up trash in this park. When you increase traffic into this park, you need to make sure that you have the resources available to maintain it. I just recently had a conversation with Mr. Pruitt regarding a fence in the park that I've been after the city for a year to fix because the kudzu is not being maintained. If you can't fix a fence with a drop-off, which by the way I have to tell you it was just recently fixed after numerous requests, but if you can't fix a fence in the park, you can't pick up the trash in the park, how are we going to be able to control what else is going to happen in this park? I've spoken with police officers that work in the park. They've told me that the crime and activities in the park are already at a level that they're unprepared to handle. And this is my backyard. I have small children. I have 8 elementary school children on my street that back up to this park, and we all use it every day. When I first learned of this project, I believe it was Councilman Orland's that commented in some of the meeting minutes that this project was initially brought up for emergency access. Well, let me tell you, emergency access I fully am in support of. And here are pictures of the park and the emergency access adjacent to the road that you're looking to put in. I see police officers on this road in their cars, on their motorcycles. I see park staff driving their trucks on these pathways every day. There is emergency access to this park. Last couple comments, because I know I'm running out of time here, is you're going to have to restructure how at least one hole of the disc golf course is. You're going to be bringing additional traffic in and around the playground, which is located here in this area. There's a lot of children that play there. You're going to be bringing a lot of tennis balls and things into the road that kids are going to be chasing after. We have alternate options available that could be presented here. We could have an improved parking lot. We could have a roundabout for drop-off to bring access in. I've tried to present these ideas to staff and have yet to be able to get a response other than that from Mr. Glover, that he would present it to the committee with no feedback. The other thing I just want to point out, and this is, I think, just in good faith and transparency of the City Council, there was a committee meeting that occurred on August 27th in which this matter was voted on to be brought here tonight, and the minutes from that meeting have not yet been published. Therefore, public review and comment and understanding of what was discussed in that meeting to bring this to this meeting tonight has not yet been disclosed to the public. I've requested that from the city and was told that it would not be available until after the next committee meeting in which those minutes could be approved. There's just a lot here, and I really honestly feel that the project as a whole is great. But there's a lot of residents. Unfortunately, we couldn't all be here tonight. This is not a normal night for your meeting. And, you know, I mean, I got kids, they got to be in bed. My wife, you know, couldn't be here. Other neighbors with kids couldn't be here. But this really feels like it's being crammed down our throats. And I appreciate everything that the council has done to make our city a wonderful place. I've lived here for over 15 years. I wouldn't live anywhere else. I love our town. I support what you're doing with it. But this particular piece of the project is bad. And I appreciate your consideration of having increased security, locking down the park at night, whatever you can do. If this project goes through as is, to please make sure that this park is safe and shut down at night. We're tired of all the activity in the park after hours, and this is just going to make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir, come forward.
Leave that for you.
Yeah, leave that one. Hi, Scott Walker, 2290 12 Stones Drive. I live just across the street from East Roswell Park. As Jason said, most of us are excited about the Complete Street project as a whole. We do have some very serious concerns about the impact of a through street going through that portion of the park, crossing the existing walking trails, which are extremely heavily used in at least 2 places and coming very close to it in several others. There's a significant impact beyond just the 6 parking spots that are lost there in terms of the usability of the remaining 36 parking spots that would essentially be backing onto a through street. If you're trying to get tennis equipment or disc golf equipment or anything else out of the trunk of your car, you're standing in the right-of-way of that through street. I know that there's been a lot of comment that they don't expect there to be an enormous amount of through traffic through there. I'm very skeptical about that. I know that a lot of my neighbors in 12 Stones, while they don't necessarily look forward to having it through street, have said, yeah, if it's there, I'll be using it as a way to get over to Eves Road from here without having to get out onto Holcomb Bridge. So one of 2 things is true. Either there won't be much traffic, which means there's not really a need for it, or there will be a lot of traffic, and it's going to be a problem given the other uses of the park that are fairly well established. So like Jason, I've found it a little challenging to keep up with developments on this through the last several months. We definitely came out to the public meeting, and I'm extremely grateful to and appreciative of the Transportation Department's efforts to incorporate the feedback from that meeting into the planning process. I know that when we first started looking at this, it looked very different than this, and that is largely a response to those concerns that were expressed then. So we're very happy that that's happened. It's just it hasn't quite alleviated all of the concerns that we have about it. And I think that there are several ways that it might be reconsidered, including, as Jason mentioned, potentially making the access emergency only with bollards or some other mechanism that would allow for emergency services access, that would not have people driving through it anytime the park is in use. I definitely have concerns about the crosswalk intersection point at the corner of the tennis courts. As you may or may not be aware, that the retaining wall that runs along there is relatively high, and that's going to have to be cut. As I understand it from looking at the plans, the engineering plans and everything, the grade there from that crosswalk point, where I understand there's to be a speed table, will have to go uphill considerably there, and there's going to have to be a fairly significant cut in that bank there in order to allow that grade to be something manageable from a flat crosswalk with a speed table. In order to do that, it's really going to either have to be leveled a considerable way up the hill, or it's going to be fairly blind for drivers coming down there and walkers coming across that crosswalk. I'm very worried about what that's going to play out in practical terms because those trails are extremely heavily used, as I'm sure you all know. So I just have a lot of things that I'm not quite satisfied about. Jason made reference to the disc golf, and as some of you may or may not be aware, I've been very involved in that over the years. Most of the concerns that the disc golf community had were addressed completely by the relocation of the route. We would have to move one hole, as Jason mentioned, but we identified with the help of the park staff a contingency plan for that. So by and large, from that standpoint, we're okay with the plan, but as a resident of the area, somebody whose kids, like Jason's, use the park extensively and sees all the activity there, I'm very, very reluctant to say that that's going to be a workable, good, long-term solution that can't be handled differently. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak? We have a motion and a second. This time I'd entertain further discussion before we take a vote. Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I've basically said the same thing for a while, so, but to go along with these two gentlemen's comments, that I do understand that there are positives to this. There's certainly the connectivity side, and no question that it will make it easier for people to get in and out at times. But, I think it still takes away from the park that we have now, and we're so proud about green space and walkability and all, and yet we're trying to make it where cars can go everywhere. And the way this moved forward, the bond never contemplated any of this in terms of the, well, I should take a step back. I think we all agree the whole part on Eves Road is fine. But the bond never talked about this as an option along the way. And granted, there are other funds beside the bond going towards this, but I wonder what that reaction would have been had we told people this is what we're going to do. And along the process, first we talked about just like a one little lane that was for emergency access, then it became a 2-lane road with a gate, and then it certainly became an open road that anybody can go in anytime. And I totally oppose that. But since I know I'm going to lose that, I would like to suggest that perhaps in response to some of the comments and concerns, that can we look at putting a gate here at the entrance along Eves Road at closing time so that it can be closed at either dusk or whatever time it may be, because then we have somebody around the park anyway that they could do that, and then at least can maybe deal with one element of after hours and people going through there all the time. Might be a small thing.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, I don't see any reason why after it's built and we monitor it, work with the Recreation Commission and department, and if it turns out that they'd like a gate to close at night, I certainly think we wouldn't work with them.
Because I think that could be one element that at least addresses a little bit that could help neighbors who are right behind there, that cars be driving in and out. And granted, there's the other side as well, but hopefully that could help cut down on some of that. So I would like to suggest we make that as an amendment to the project.
Councilmember Orleans.
I was basically going to have the same comments and bring Parks and Rec up and talk about the idea of closing this park and these through roads at dark when the parks are supposed to close. So I would like that looked into by Rec Commission, Parks and Rec Department, and Transportation.
Certainly work with them. Yes, sir.
To do that.
All right.
And maybe it's something we should look at all our parks. I don't know. But definitely this one.
I certainly believe it's within the realm of the Recreation Board to decide whether or not parks should be gated at night. If we're going to gate parks, we need to gate, closing one gate and leaving one gate open is like locking one door and leaving the other door open. It's not going to have a whole lot of impact, folks. And so if we're going to gate one park, we need to look at gating all of our parks. And it's a much broader decision than this. So if the Recreation Commission and the Parks Department believes we should gate our parks at night, I'm open to that. I support this because of connectivity. I support it for the same reason Mr. Sabatino is against it, because it creates greater access to our parks. And I believe as a public park, we're trying to encourage people to have access to that park. So I do support this. Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Just along that side, I agree with you on the overall, but this is a new road that has not always been there, that it's something that's creating, I think, an impact on people who live right there, who have and bought properties based on that. And so I think we have some responsibility to try and deal with that impact. It's different from gate on all parks that have always been there, or been there for a long time.
When I was a boy, there was not, the only park we had was Woodstock Park and Waller Park. So every park in Rotherham other than Woodstock and Waller is a new park in my mind. Councilmember Diamond, it's all your perspective of what's new and what's old. Did you have your hand up?
I'm not going anywhere on that part, but I think, you know, I've spent a lot of time in this park. I don't live by it, but I have driven there and in it. I used to say I need a condo there because we were there constantly. I'm a little surprised that the Fouts Road folks would not be jumping up and down for this, because I find that every time that we dumped out onto Fouts Road and clogged up that intersection to Holcomb Bridge for 2 or 3 lights to get out to turn left and then turn around and turn left, we were on Eves Road anyway. I mean, all of us coming from the west side are on Eves Road anyway. And I guess the bigger thing is the wear and tear. I mean, to use that as a cut through would not be practical in my mind, because those speed bumps are as high as anything I've ever seen in my whole life. They just about tore up my car just going back and forth there. So I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying I'm surprised by that, because I would think it would alleviate the 12 Stones traffic in a huge way. And not to mention the traffic that takes off the Holcomb Bridge. And we hear a lot of the time, and particularly in this area, that we need to be doing something to alleviate traffic that's on Holcomb Bridge. And this is traffic that's going to be on Eves Road anyway. I do have a question about, and I don't know if this is for Chief or for Morgan, because it's Park Police, but I have a concern about any comment that any of our officers perceivably made about being unprepared to handle crime in the area, and I'd be interested to hear somebody's official take on that, because that seems to be the root of, that's the root of my concern anyway.
Several months back, Councilmember Orleans asked me to pull the numbers for the crime stats for East Roswell Park, and I did that for about a 2-year period, and the greatest number of calls for service in East Roswell Park were answering the false alarm at the rec building there. The most common the most common crime that we had occur there was breaking into cars, and that was maybe 10 over 2 years. And there was a drug arrest. Other than that, it was very, very low crime rate within the park. I would anticipate that if the assumption is correct, that more people will be coming into the park, then you can expect the crime rate to increase, but I wouldn't think it would be anything significant. It's very low right now.
Do you feel like we have adequate staff to handle that, or do we need to step that up, or do you think there's any concern on our officers' part that they're not supported enough to police that area?
No, sometimes officers say things off the cuff, like we experienced in an email today where they say things not realizing that they're going to be taken verbatim for what they say, but the numbers don't support what those officers said in the instance of East Roswell Park.
And I don't know who I'm asking this to, but as far as closing the park, would that be a rec commission call as closing the entrances, or is that within our purview?
They set the policy and the hours. I'm sure that, I would hope that they would consult with the council before they took that action, but again, I see that's a rec commission and parks operational decision.
And that's something we can bring up, or is it? Yeah. Okay.
They can y'all can suggest it to them, they can suggest it to us. I think it's within the authority of the Parks Department to close it if they think it's appropriate. One or all entrances. I just believe if you close one entrance and leave one open, you're not really accomplishing a lot. It's like locking the back door and leaving the front door open. I'm not sure that discourages anybody from coming in. Councilmember Orleans.
Well, going back to the original point, the intent was for both sides of the park to be closed. I think from what I've seen over the years, that by council bringing it up tonight as an issue, that the commission will address it. I know Councilman Price, I'm sure will take it to him, and Mr. Rogers is here in the audience, and I'm sure he'll take it to him. So I'm confident they'll look at it very closely and move forward.
Councilmember Price.
Yes, thank you. I've made note of it, and I will bring it to the commission and see if they have any response or suggestion of where we might go on that score. Just in response to Mr. Sabatino, I hate to think that anyone thinks that this has been a project that's rapidly gone through. if anything, I feel like this is one of the slowest things we've done because we've had so many changes and iterations of the drawing and it, you know, to accommodate the different comments that we've received, because this was, I think, in the works well before I was on transportation, which was more than 2 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been quite a long time, and I've seen so many different drawings of this, and you know, so many different public comments about it. So it's pretty pretty exhausted in the possibilities, I think, as it comes to its current form. And certainly that's not the issue tonight anyway. The issue tonight is simply approving the contract to move forward. So I think in some ways we've already determined that we're going to do it, although you never really do it until the money goes out. But I sort of feel like our discussion tonight is the financial aspect and not necessarily the project itself, although certainly if there's specific things that we haven't addressed or didn't come up in those multiple meetings, then certainly we'd want to make sure that we don't make any mistakes. And I think we have that option of putting in bollards at some point if there's
Absolutely.
you know, too much traffic or what have you, to deal with it at that point. But I think most people who've looked at this feel like this is a prudent course, and I hope we just go on this course with obviously the opportunity to scale back if we need to.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I will say that there's one portion that we're concerned about has come about very quickly, and certainly the open road part of it. And I don't recall ever having a real discussion of this in a council meeting. It's been a committee discussion along the way. And no offense, but in all due respect, the times of discussions being brought up after certain decisions have been made have happened many times. So this is one of those that just comes along when the topic is being discussed. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilmember DePolito.
Thank you. I remember working on this as liaison, which was a long time ago.
That's 3, right.
So I've always thought this Complete Street program was a great project. I really like the connectivity that it provides between the river, the school, and the park. We kind of hit everything all in one shot in one project, so I think it does a fabulous job. I support connectivity, so I am very comfortable with the connection to the park. I think the impact will be significantly less than some of the concerns that have been voiced. I think the number of street miles will be greatly reduced. I know living on the far side of a Roswell area park, my car would probably have 30,000 less miles on it if I was able to drive into the north side of Roswell area park instead of driving all the way down to the other side and back in and through the whole park to get to the building. So I think it's a good project, including the connector road, and I support it.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. That's Councilmember Orlins, Councilmember Price, Councilmember Wynn, Councilmember DePolito, Councilmember Diamond. All opposed. Councilmember Eichelhardt. Passes 5-1.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I apologize it took so long to get this. If I knew you had been there, we would have moved it up.
We'll be making lots of calls daily to the police department.
Yes, sir, and we'll be responding.
I appreciate the response.
And I would suggest that you take your concerns to the Rec Commission. Those, Councilmember Orlins, those are public. Councilmember Price, when's the next Rec Commission meeting?
I'll be happy to send Mr. Sabatino an email. I know he sent me several in the past, or actually I was copied on them, and I'm always available by telephone. I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
I'll take the opportunity anytime.
But the next meeting is
I think to the fourth Thursday of the month.
September 25th at 6 p.m.
Next item.
Okay, next item is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with Vertical Earth for the State Route 140 from State Route 400 northbound ramps to Old Alabama project in the amount of $1,040,000 $1,040,472.64. Mr. Asenbrock.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. You will recall that we did a Holcomb Bridge at 400 corridor study some years ago, and it created a list of short, medium, and long-term projects. This is one of the projects that was created. Here is now the completed set of plans. I wanted you to see this because this is a product of a lot of work. What we're doing here is very subtle but very important. The northbound ramp from 400 is currently a single lane, and it's going to be 2 lanes. There is a signal at the ramp at the intersection now, but it's basically a pedestrian signal for people to cross across. That's going to be a full stop-and-go traffic signal. We call these the valves. What will happen here is that a combination of the new signal and the road geometry will eliminate what has been commonly referred as a trap lane, which is cars that are heading eastbound on 400 merging with the cars that are coming northbound, and the ones that want to go east are merging and weaving with the ones that want to turn north on Old Alabama, because that's the primary desire line. So what we're going to have is a combination of median improvements, lane improvements, and the signal, which will do 2 things. If you are going eastbound on Holcomb Bridge, the northbound traffic will be stopped. So you'll have free flow to either continue east or to turn north on Old Alabama. And then those vehicles will be stopped, and the ones on the ramp will be allowed to go freely to either east or north. And so you're going to eliminate that whole merging and weaving situation from a combination of basically the signal and some positive guidance created by the median improvements. Also, because of these median improvements, the westbound left turn lane will be extended through the intersection it is now. So we'll have increased safety, increased mobility. Interestingly enough, the valves actually increase the mobility in this area, and then you're going to have some increased storage and a lot more positive guidance, so you won't have those people at the last minute in the lane that realize, oh my gosh, I'm in this left turn lane and I wanted to go left, or oh, I wanted to turn left on Old Alabama but I'm in the wrong lane. So that will be eliminated, and this is a project that is funded by the Georgia Department of Transportation. It is not a bond project, but it was one of those ones that came out of the HBR corridor study. You know, the feedback is that study is producing million-dollar projects just like this.
Great presentation. Do we have a motion?
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Orleans, you have a question.
I'm assuming this light is coordinated with the one on the other side of 400.
Yes, sir. It is part of the ATMS project. It'll be part of our backbone.
Part of the ATMS, or they'll be coordinated together?
Yes, sir.
For sure.
Yes, sir. And coordinated with the westbound through lane as well.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item is approval of a resolution to sign a construction agreement with Georgia Department of Transportation for State Route 140 from State Route 400 northbound ramps to Old Alabama project in the amount of $1,045,903.11, and approval of the budget amendment 22142-2000910 2014 in the amount of $148,848.11. Mr. Asen.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. Same project. This is just accepting the grant that says that GDOT is paying for this, and we are letting the project to construction, and we are overseeing the construction. They're also paying for the they're also waiving their ability. They originally had said they wanted to charge us for construction oversight, and now we are going to do the construction oversight.
Do we have a motion?
Move to take their money.
Motion by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. I'd like to report that Nancy and I and Steve had a great meeting with GDOT.
We did.
Last week.
Monday.
Was it Monday?
Monday, yes, sir.
It was Monday. It just seems like last week. We met with
were you able to meet with
Dan Moody? Yes. Dan Moody was president, representing the GDOT board. Harry Geisinger was there. We had Toby Carr.
Right. Chief Engineer Russell McMurray.
Chief Engineer and Todd Long, so we had all
Deputy Commissioner.
all the big dogs. But we were quite pleased when the Chief Engineer of the GDOT described the Gateway South Atlanta Street project as a signature project. Steve covered it briefly, and they said, we want to talk more about it. It's such a great project. So we had some very positive feedback from GDOT. We worked out some issues, so things are going very well between Roswell and GDOT, working on all of the projects you just mentioned and other projects. And we're confident that when the time comes, there will be funding for South Atlanta Street.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So good work. This time we'll hear from our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to remove item 15 from the agenda. There's some legal issues that I still have to work out. We're
It's
in
just
pretty good
cursed.
shape.
It's cursed.
It's this is all legal.
We're getting closer though, right?
Yes, this is
Very close.
This is not anybody's fault but mine. So
It's not anybody's fault. It's just cursed. But it'll happen. We will have a fire station one day.
I should be able to bring it back to the next
Councilman
council.
Orleans has a snide comment. Let's hear from him.
Me, a snide comment on this issue? No. Especially dealing with legal? No. No, I just want to still, we're missing a few tweaks on the legal contract. So instead of the approval of resolution in the contract tonight, I would just like to move that we move forward with the swapping of the property and refine the contracts to bring forward at our next council meeting. But this project is moving forward.
So this will move us forward if we pass this motion tonight.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion to move forward by Councilman Orleans. Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilman Eichelhardt. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to move forward? Is that a hand up or a question, Councilman Price? It's not a final approval, it's a moving forward approval. It will come back to council. I see, let me see your hands again. I see everybody's hands up. Passes unanimously. At this time, we'll hear from, we have a recommendation for closure to discuss personnel, litigation, real estate by our city attorney. Do we have a motion for closure? I'm not recognizing Councilmember Wynn. Do I have a motion for closure? The longer you wait, the longer we delay here. I need a motion.
Move to go.
Motion for closure by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Price. All in favor, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We're adjourned. For closure.